So why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do and why you're here in the Netherlands?
Yeah. Okay. So my name is Michel Bauwens.
Okay.
I live in Chiang Mai, Thailand, which is like the second city in Thailand in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a member and founder of a foundation. It's called the Foundation for Peer-to-Peer Alternatives.
Okay.
And basically what we're doing is documenting, researching and promoting peer-to-peer alternatives.
Okay.
And so basically what I've been doing here in Amsterdam is talking to people, giving seminars, lectures about how peer-to-peer is not just technology but really a new way of doing things, a new way of being in the world, and just kind of the taste of the next society in a way.
So what's peer-to-peer itself?
Okay. So peer-to-peer, the word peer means more or less equal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So peer-to-peer is it's a little bit difficult, the definition, the relational dynamic in distributed networks. So wherever you have a network of people,
mm-hmm.
where you have no coercion, in other words, no obligations, no limitations to how you can connect to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have that, then you have a kind of bottom-up relationship that starts between those people in a network. And those relationships are peer-to-peer networks. So you get three different things with that. You get peer production, that's when those people start deciding to do something in common, to produce something. Think of Linux, think of Wikipedia, think of I don't know how many billions of pages you can find on Google which are produced by people together. The second thing is, well, how do they actually manage that? Given that they're doing all those things, how do they manage those relationships? I call that peer governance, so governing the peer-to-peer projects. And the third thing is peer property, which is, okay, how do you protect it from individual appropriation or corporate appropriation? So if you decide to do something together, how do you make sure it stays for everybody rather than, kind of benefit only to a few?
So has peer-to-peer always existed? Is it something that's very old, or is it a recent thing?
Well, it's both old and new. It's old in the sense that probably for most of human history, apart from the last 3,000–4,000 years, the people were living in small communities, and there was no state separate from the people that could oppress them in a way. So probably you could say that wherever people were together in small numbers, they were somehow doing peer-to-peer. The thing is, as soon as you reach a certain limit, say 150 people, this has actually been studied, it's called the Dunbar number. It's
mm-hmm.
kind of a limit to how many relationships people can manage on their own in a small group. As soon as you go beyond that, so society becomes more complex, you have hierarchy, which is a kind of simplifying of those relationships. And then suddenly you can only relate in certain ways as dictated by the top of the hierarchy. Yeah.
So is peer-to-peer different now than it was in the past? Like, because we still have groups.
The difference is that we finally invented a technology that allows people to work in small groups, even in big projects, and even when they're not together. So that's a big difference.
Okay.
So I'm not saying technology is the cause of it, but technology is certainly an enabling factor, and it's probably, societies. I mean, a hierarchy kind of what it says is that the whole should not be more complex than the one person deciding at the top. Now that's breaking down everywhere. The complexity of technology of society is such that you can't do that anymore. So we looked for and invented technology which allows us to go beyond hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And so peer-to-peer is different in that sense that today it's technology dependent. You look at those big projects like Wikipedia and Linux, okay, yes, hundreds of thousands of people are working on it, but if you then look at how they're working on it, well, it's basically small teams.
It sounds a lot like communism or like Marx, but is it? Of course, we know through communism that it was ended up in these huge hierarchies, even though it was going on about the workers. Yeah. How's it relate to that?
Well, it has actually nothing to do with communism as understood being the Soviet Union or those centralized systems are the complete opposite of peer-to-peer. Now it has something to do with the ideal that eventually, you know, what Marx said, you know, how is it again? Each gives according to his ability, and each gets on base of need. So, well, yes, in that case, when you do a Linux or Wikipedia, you volunteer for the project, and you make it common, and then anybody can use it. Yeah. So, in that sense, there is a relationship.
Okay.
Now, it's not idealistic. I don't know if you want to hear that story, but that's something that's often said that, well, that's too idealistic, right?
Right.
I would say no, because it's really based on different ways of people acting for their own benefit. Yeah, so it's like you have different stages. The basic stage is you're just doing it for yourself, but the mere fact that different people are doing the same thing for themselves is actually beneficial for the group. You know, like Dell, you order your computer, you configure it on the net. Well, for Dell, they're learning all that stuff from all these people doing it, even though everybody's doing it on its own. The second step is you're doing it for your own, but you know that you're also sharing at the same time. And those are the new Web 2.0 projects, like Delicious, you're sharing bookmarks. Flickr, you're sharing photos. YouTube, you're sharing videos. You're still doing it for yourself, but you know you're doing it in group, and that you benefit from the other people doing it. So that's kind of like a step up. And the most advanced step, if you like, is when you know you're actually producing something in common as a group. And that's Linux and Wikipedia. So there's a hierarchy of cooperation, of sharing, and in each case, you're doing it also for yourself. Yeah, if you join a project like Wikipedia, you give a little bit, but you get everything that everybody's doing. You know, so it's really beneficial. There's also a way in which giving is receiving, like if you're in a family and you know with your children, you're not asking yourself, what am I getting back? Because actually the mere fact of giving is what gives you the pleasure. So many people are actually collaborating because it's fun, because they like to share, they like to do stuff together.
It sounds very in line with also what a lot of the message of spirituality in giving to others. Does peer-to-peer have another dimension in how it touches, for instance, the spiritual traditions?
I think there is a spiritual element which is about how you relate to others. Yeah? I mean, in the market, you relate to others as subject to object. You know, it's an impersonal relationship. You buy something for somebody, yeah, of course you say hello and stuff, but it's a neutral thing. Yeah, the ideal of peer-to-peer is that you have this notion of peers. So you're actually dealing with another subject, another person, and so I think that's an element of kind of like a spiritual element of it. And when you then apply it in a general way, then it's about treating nature as a partner, yeah, treating the producers of what you consume, treating them as a partner, like in fair trade. So certainly that's a spiritual and political element that's kind of implicit.
Okay.
In peer-to-peer.
Does peer-to-peer have any brother or sister ideologies or partners in?
Well, I mean, historically, what we call the commons has been existing for a long time. Any traditional society, traditional village, has some common area where everybody can, you know, use the wood, get the herbs, whatever. And it's really only in the capitalist system in the 16th century, what is called the enclosures, where these common areas are abandoned and privatized. But then you see the workers, they create mutualities. Yeah, so they share the risk of living together, and everybody puts in, but if you seek on base of need, you can take out, right? So the welfare state system is based on generalizing those common activities of the workers. And so yeah, I think it's continuation. I think people have always wanted to do that in some way or another. But what we have now, the big advantage is that we have abundance in immaterial resources. We have the internet, we have the web. So by creating this abundance, it's more easy to share.
Hierarchies. Can you talk a little bit about how peer-to-peer affects hierarchies?
Yes. So I think it's incorrect to say that there is no hierarchy in peer-to-peer. There is some form of hierarchy, but traditionally how hierarchy is defined is you have a small group of people who kind of like go out of the system and then decide what the other people in the system should do, right? And so there's an element of coercion involved in hierarchy, which I don't think you necessarily have in peer-to-peer. I think peer-to-peer is more people saying, okay, shall we do this together? And then of course the people who launch it have some kind of extra leverage because they inspire the others, like Jimmy Wales in Wikipedia, or Richard Stallman with free software, or Linus Torvald. We see there's certainly there's a hierarchy of engagement and there's a hierarchy of experience. And usually what you find is there'll be some kind of core leadership, setting the kind of broad strategy or constitution of the project. But then within the team, it's really a meritocracy. It's, okay, for this kind of project, you're the best programmer, you're the best creative guy, and then hierarchy becomes something very fluid in the work itself, according to what type of work you're doing. Or
how does peer-to-peer apply to the average person? Like how can you see it affecting?
Right. Okay. So what I'm saying is, first on a general scale, that as our society evolves from less and less material to more and more immaterial production, and as in the immaterial sphere, we get more and more for benefit production and less for profit production. So this sphere of peer production, P2P, is expanding. It's the technological infrastructure, internet, web. It's the organizational infrastructure, the way we organize together. So it's a third mode of production, a third mode of governance, and a third mode of property. And it's more efficient than the old way of doing things. And individually then, that's the next step. Individually, when you are freely producing something, and you're not dependent on somebody else, then it changes your whole outlook on life and on how you work. You work based out of interest and passion. And so that whatever you are doing will always be almost optimal. And then together what we want is to make the best possible product. So there's always this kind of continuous improvement of what you're doing together. Yeah, and I just think it's more fun to work together. It's just, working with friends, working with people who share the same ideal. I think it's a lot better than, working for a corporation.
And you've got a lot of experience in that, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I've been in the corporate world, and one of the reasons I quit is that I think that, the working relationships today have become dysfunctional. It's just not working. You see more and more innovation is taking place outside the corporation. Pharmaceutical industry, is really stuck. Can't really innovate in terms of medicines anymore. You see, Windows and Vista having, Microsoft and Vista having all this trouble, and then you see these alternatives emerging, which are doing it better and more easier, and more productively, and making better products. So it's clearly an alternative.
Do you think that most people can immediately start producing in the commons and making a living out of it, or is it something that's going to take decades to roll out?
Yeah, it's probably going to take decades, but it's emerging and it's growing, but it's going to take some time. So the big problem, of course, is you're volunteering to do something in common, which is free to use. So you have a problem of sustainability of peer production. So what's happening right now is that peer production and the market are codependent on each other. I mean, the market is more and more dependent on social innovation, which happens through these means. And as a peer producer, you have to go regularly back to the market to make money.
But at the same time, you also pointed out in some of your talks that you can also be, if you add money to a peer-produced product, like for instance the dilemma inside Firefox, it can torpedo the whole initiative. Is that something that you know any more about, or people are tracking?
Okay, so what you can do is, well, you know, I make a difference between those projects which are based on weak sharing, on weak links, like Delicious and Flickr. You're doing your own thing, and you're also sharing, but the main thing is you're doing it for yourself. So you don't really know the other people. In this case, what you see is the companies that are emerging are those that are making the platforms. Yeah, so I mean that's a huge new industry, is making participatory platforms, and these are making money based on your sharing, but they're also enabling your sharing. So it's a kind of mutual benefit, right? If you're really producing together, like in Wikipedia or in Linux and other projects, you are producing a commons. And what you can do is you can't sell the commons because it's protected by these Creative Commons and General Public License kind of legislation. But what you can do is create derivative strategies, like saying, you know, this is really good software. Well, I'll install it in your company, and you don't pay me for the software, but you pay us for installing it, training you, helping you with difficulties. So, as an individual, you give freely to the commons, but you learn from it. So you increase your knowledge capital. You get to know people. You increase your relationship capital, your network capital. If you, to the degree you're trustworthy and give more, your reputation goes up. So all these are benefits you can then go to the market. Okay. And so it's not direct, but it's indirect. You get, you do get benefit.
Okay.
And so what you can see is, as an individual, you can say, well, it's not sustainable because, you know, I cannot always work for free on a peer project. But if you look at the peer project as such, you can see that, well, every 3 months, 15% of people are stopping, but another 15% are adding to it. So it's sustainable as a project, even though it might not be sustainable for the individual on the long run. But then you see what people are doing is they go into the market, get some money, and then when the project is finished, they don't want to have a new job immediately after, because they really want to do, you know, this project they're passionate about.
Well, I think passion can go, you know, onto the market or go into the commons. I think that we're going to see many gradations between, but it's good to separate the two, just so that we know clearly what we're talking about.
It makes me think of the Middle Ages, where, you know, I mean, you were in the feudal system, but you could get out and you would go become a monk. And the region where I live in Southeast Asia, you could be a monk for a few years. You know, it's the same kind of process.
That's stepping out, basically.
Yeah, you step out and then you step back in.
Right.
You know, so you can step out of the market, do some peer production, and okay, you need some more money, you'll go back to the market.
Okay. What I'd like to ask you, how does it apply to, like, I'm just taking some extreme examples, but yeah, for instance, people that are not living in developing, who are living in developing countries, or for instance, you're poor, you've got no money, you're living in a shanty town. How is peer-to-peer affecting really disadvantaged people in every term? Okay.
So, well, one of the advantages is that you can have access to infrastructure, which is dramatically cheaper, because it's produced by those communities, and, you know, it's freely available. That means that for those people who want to access, you know, the network world, it's going to be a lot cheaper. If they themselves engage in it, you know, because I mean they do have programmers in those countries, you know, and so if you engage in free software production as compared to just buying it from a major multinational, you're learning a lot. You're learning so much more. So you're creating this intellectual capital in your own country that you're not creating if you're just, buying an off-the-shelf product. But basically, the profit is going to another country. So those are advantages.
Okay.
And of course, I mean, you have to be creative. Maybe collectively buying a computer, or using microfinance schemes, to actually get access to it.
Well, thank you very much for this talk on peer-to-peer. And I'd like to ask you, could you tell our viewers, how can we reach you?
Okay, well, I have an email, Michel Sub, SUB 2003 @yahoo.com. We have a website, it's a kind of encyclopedia, it's called P2Pfoundation.net wiki. We have a blog, which is blog.p2pfoundation.net. I think that's enough. Through those sources you can.
Any and also just finally, what are your plans? Where is it going with your organization, and what's happening in the near future?
Okay, so basically, P2P Foundation. At some point in your life, you say, this is what I want to do. This is what I believe. Just kind of like planting a flag virtually in the ground. And then you attract people. So what was an individual project becomes a collective project. We have about 30, 40 people working together now. And my desire now is to go from the virtual to the physical. Get those people to meet up, think about it, learn from each other. And I'm very ambitious in a way in my social ambition. This is something that will change the world. So I want all those movements and people who are doing it to realize that they're not alone, but they're actually participating in an important change. It's actually kind of a political and social project. Let's have a world where people can be peers. I think that's exciting.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, James.
Bye.